Hello and welcome back to CornerSports. I'm Albert Asnauer, and if you haven't yet, go ahead and hit that subscribe button. And today we're going to talk about the MLS Cup Playoffs Semifinals, and boy do we have some juicy matchups on our hands. The first matchup we're going to be talking about is the Seattle Sounders taking on the Vancouver Whitecaps. These two Cascadia rivals will look to book a spot in the Western Conference Finals. Vancouver Whitecaps, who come into this matchup full of confidence after smacking the Earthquakes around 5-0, which, by the way, I predicted they would win comfortably. However, you should not compare the Sounders to the San Jose Earthquakes because they are levels apart. The Vancouver Whitecaps will look to continue their strong dominance at home this season, and these two teams have played each other 3 times this season, splitting the series 1-1-1. A win for each, a loss for each, and 1 draw. The Sounders will be missing a plethora of players for this matchup. Clint Dempsey Deduce, who picked up a red card on decision day, will be missing. Jordan Morris is still dealing with an injury. Brad Evans is out as well. Ozzy Alonso is dealing with an injury, as well as Gustav Svensson, who has been immense this season for the Sounders, will also be missing for this game. However, and this might be a crazy theory, but missing all these players might actually play in the favor of the Sounders, especially in the first leg, because the Whitecaps enjoy playing their football on the break and enjoy being on the counter-attack and not so much a possession-style football. It might cause them some problems. What the Sounders need to be careful of is the Whitecaps are so great off of set pieces, and they need to be very careful. Coach Carl Robinson has a plethora of players coming off the bench for him who can fit into a role, and everybody on this team knows what their position is, knows what they need to do, and they look like they're having a lot of fun playing together. Usually teams who know their roles and enjoy playing together tend to do really well in the playoffs, and the Whitecaps are not an exception. Seattle are the defending champions, and they deserve all the respect in the world. However, the defending champion in the playoffs has not done well since 2012 when Galaxy won the cup back-to-back. Since then, the defending champion has lost in their first matchup, be that the knockout stage or the semifinals, and has not progressed further than that. And I'm going to follow this principle. I think the Vancouver Whitecaps get it done against the Seattle Sounders. At home, they will win 2-0, especially after completely smacking San Jose around and riding high on that confidence. They will extend their home winning streak to 13, and then they will travel to Seattle and play to a 1-1 draw and win on a 3-1 aggregate. The next matchup I want to talk about is Toronto FC versus New York Red Bulls. Fresh off of an amazingly flawless performance in Chicago against the Fire, the New York Red Bulls made me eat my words after I picked them to lose to the Fire in Chicago. However, these two games will be the toughest of their season against Toronto FC, and I am eager to see how they do. In my last video, I told you guys that playoff experience is a hell of a thing, and the New York Red Bulls have more experience than any other team in the playoffs this season. They've made the playoffs 8-9 times in a row, and with Danny Royer back on the pitch for them, who is immense to their team play and was great throughout the season, especially in the summer when they looked fantastic, they will look to go for another upset in these playoffs. Look, I can sit here and praise the Red Bulls for hours, but that would only mean that I'd have to double the amount of hours I praised Toronto for. What they did last season was great, and what they did this season was even greater. They improved on their fantastic 2016 season, and they came a fingertip away from lifting the trophy that year, and they'll look to do it this year. They have assembled the deepest squad in the league right now, and probably one of, if not the best team to have ever played in MLS. And coming into the playoffs, they've won 8 out of their last 11 games, and they're on fire. New York will have to hit this Toronto team quickly like they did the Fire, scoring twice in 15 minutes. And if there's any disadvantage I see with Toronto, it's the perceived idea that they can't get it done in the playoffs, and players like Altidore and Bradley will look to improve on their disappointing 2016 playoff campaign, and I think that will only motivate them further. This Toronto team needed that experience and that bitter taste in their mouth after coming an inch away from lifting the trophy last season. They will look to come into these playoffs and blow everyone out of the water. Although New York, who has already proved me wrong once, going away and winning 4-0 with their terrible away record this season, will look to prove me wrong again. And look, New York has made me eat my words before, and I'm sure if anyone from NY Red Bulls is watching this video, they'll try to make me eat my words again, but I think these two teams in New York will play to a 1-1 draw, after which they'll both travel up to Toronto, where Toronto will just be too much for these Red Bulls, and their poor away form will catch up with them, and they'll lose 3-1, and Toronto will move to the Eastern Conference Final on a total of 4-1 aggregate. And the next juicy matchup in these MLS Cup playoffs is Portland Timbers taking on Houston Dynamo. The Dynamo are coming into this matchup having played a very grueling and difficult 120 minutes against a very experienced SKC team, and like I said, the Dynamo would win 1-0, and that's exactly what they did. However, these Timbers have sat home, they've rested their legs, they've focused their minds, and they look to take the playoffs by a storm. If the Dynamo want anything out of these two games, they need to do it at home. Their fantastic home record will need to be pushed to the limits, and they need to play that wonderful counter-attacking football that they love to do very well against this Timbers team, so that they can slow down their attack, and if they can do that, this matchup will become that much more interesting. The Timbers scored 60 goals this season. That was league's third best, and they will look to continue their scoring prowess against these Houston Dynamo. However, with Fernando Adi missing, who is not only an integral scoring part to this team, but also his hold the play allows this team to play a great style of football, will be missing for this game and possibly for the second one. However, they have Valeri, who's in contention for MLS MVP yet again, who by the way has scored 6 times against these Houston Dynamo and will look to get on the score sheet yet again. With Leonardo picking up an injury and effectively taking him out of this matchup, and De La Garza, who is out for the rest of this season, these two previously Galaxy studs will be a huge miss for the Dynamo and their quest to shut down this goal-scoring great offense of the Timbers. However, Wilmer Cabrera has a very deep defensive roster, and he knows how to set up his team, and he will look to stifle this all-guns-blazing offense. This team just knows how to keep clean sheets, like I've said plenty of times now, and they know how to do it, especially at home in the playoffs, and riding high on that confidence will give this team a massive boost, who is a great underdog in this matchup. For me, the Dynamo, if they want anything out of this matchup, and if they really want to move on to the conference finals, they need to win at home, and I think that is exactly what they'll do. They'll pick up a 2-1 win at home. When they travel to Portland, the Timbers will derail this orange train and win 3-0, moving forward to the conference finals on a 4-1 aggregate. And if my predictions stand, they will play their Cascadia rival, the Whitecaps. And last but certainly not least, NYCFC take on Columbus Crew in a matchup that I think will have the most amount of goals. The Crew are coming into this matchup having played an MLS Cup Playoff Classic against the Atlanta United in a game where we saw terrible finishing and terrible defense, which should have had a lot more goals than it had. And if you watched my knockout stage preview, exactly what I predicted happened. I told you that the Crew would move on penalties, and they did move on penalties, and I'm excited about that prediction. But let's talk about this game. This game quite possibly could be the last playoff game played in Columbus ever, and this adds so much more pressure on these Columbus players, but I think they will look to perform at home for quite possibly one last time, with their fans backing them as they've done for 20 plus years, because this is an MLS original, and it is always sad to see an original try to move. And they're coming up against Patrick Vieira's NYCFC, who are the second best team in the Eastern Conference this season. Coming into this season, NYCFC needed to do one thing and one thing only, and that is fix their atrocious defensive record. And they did just that. This season, they have allowed 5th fewest goals in the league, and that is an amazing turnaround compared to how many goals they were letting in last season. This team has a lot of young and old talent on it, and they've mixed very well. Players like David Villa, like Alex Ring, like Yangel Herrera, like Jack Harrison, our Lord and Savior Andrea Pirlo, and other talent that it just makes this team look really great. However, they're coming up against a team in the Crew who has not lost in 3 months. That is an amazing feeling to have, especially in the playoffs. And this Crew team is coming off of a classic game against Atlanta United, and they'll be fired up for this matchup, no doubt about it. This one is always promising a lot of goals, and I don't expect anything different from these two teams. I think they'll find the back of the net plenty, and in the first leg in Columbus, these fans will be behind the Crew from minute 1 to minute 90, and I think that'll help them a lot, and I think they'll pick up a 3-2 win at home in Columbus, taking their 1-goal advantage to New York. After giving this NYCFC so much credit for fixing their defense this season, I'm going completely against my word, and I think when these two teams travel to New York, this game will end in a 2-2 draw, which means the Crew will move into the Eastern Conference Finals to probably play Toronto FC. Thank you again for coming back to Corner Sports and listening to me talk about the MLS semifinals, previews, and predictions. Look, if your team is playing, go ahead and leave me a comment below. Let me know how you think they will do. How will they play? Will they win? Will they lose? What are your expectations? I'm looking forward to having a discussion about the MLS Cup Playoffs with you, and I will see you on the rebound when I post my Conference Finals previews. See you then.